Highly melanated.
I've been walking for so long, and I've been fighting so hard. My life is a protest that they disregard. Ooh.
Why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your Target. Fuck your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
There's too many of you crying. Brother, there's far too many of you dying. You know we got to find a way to bring some movement here today. Hey, Father, we don't need to escalate. You see, war is not the answer. Only love can conquer. You know we've got to find a way to bring some love here today. Pick it line, sister. Pick it sign, sister. Don't punish me, sister, with brutality. Sister, talk to me, sister, so you can see, sister. Oh, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Yeah, what's going on? What's going on? What's going on? What's going on? Whoa, 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 whoa. Na 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 na. Pick it lines, brother, and pick it sides, brother. Don't punish me, brother. Brutality, brother. Don't talk to me, brother, so you can see, brother. Oh, what's going on? 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 I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on? What's going on?
This is what I gotta say to the people who are destroying things. If you really feel like you have to take an opportunity, like if you're going to be an opportunistic, something is wrong with you. If you cannot stand up and fight the good fight and you want to be a cheater and go ahead and take what we're trying to do, something is wrong with you. Because what we're trying to do is stand up for the basic rights of humanity. And that's what we're trying to do, and we're trying to do it in a peaceful way. Who do not want to go through this anymore? Okay? I want to be able to go in a white neighborhood and feel safe. I want to be able, when a cop is driving behind me, I don't have to clench and be tense, okay? I want to be able just to be free and not have to think about every step I take. Because at the end of the day, being black is a crime. At the end of the day, being born black is a crime to them. And I don't understand why. Because we're all humans. And that's sickening.
Tell them.
I gotta go, man.
Be careful.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Highly Melanated. Melanation in your brain, y'all.
Melanation in your nation.
Melanin. Just drinking ether. Energy everywhere.
PJ, it's time to keep fighting.
Yushi, it's time for the Black women to stand up, take the baton, and run forward and lead this movement.
Red. I'm so sick and tired of being sick and tired. Red.
Blair, this time feels different.
And we are joined on the Zoom call with.
Hello, I'm Kwame Thompson. I am an attorney in Atlanta, Georgia, and I practice civil litigation and I taught criminal law.
Okay.
Come on, attorney at law. Yes.
And Kwame, who are you? Kwame, give yourself a line that you're feeling in this moment.
I am attorney Kwame Thompson, and I am a fighter of justice.
Come
on. That works.
Okay. That's how you know he's a lawyer. He's succinct and to the point.
I like to be succinct.
I'm telling you.
I like it.
And welcome back to another episode of Highly Melanated, where we melanate your palate and feed your soul. See, you didn't do that last time.
The auto-tune version.
And so, as always, guys, you can follow us on all forms of social media. That is Highly Melanated Podcast on Instagram. You can follow us on Twitter. That's H_Melanated Pod. You can go to our website at highlymelanatedpodcast.com. And as well, pretty soon there will be an 800 number, guys, that you can leave a voicemail, and we'll provide the information once we get that update.
Y'all gonna be able to straight Kim Possible us.
Call
me, beach me if you want to reach me. Sorry, I had to do it.
Well, welcome to the Highly Melanated Manor, where we melanate your palate and feed your soul. I am Jeeves, and I'm coming back to go around and see if anybody would have any toast or shout out. As you may know, I thought that I may have retired, but it's all that more important now that I come back into the mix, because it's not just a United States issue. It is something that is global. So, as to start off with drinks, is there anything that anybody would want, any type of drink or alcoholic beverage? There, we know that you do not drink. So what would anyone like?
How about we allow our guest to describe his beverage of choice, and then along with the toast, that's just an opportunity for you to give a particular shout out to anybody that you feel like deserves some type of recognition right now, or somebody that you would like to highlight.
All right. Well, I'm coming to you from Atlanta, Georgia. So I have some sweet tea here. So I'd like to give a toast to all of the protesters around the world. And I want to give a shout out to my hometown of St. Louis. In Ferguson, Missouri, they just elected the first female and the first Black mayor, Mayor-elect Ella Jones, a personal friend of mine. And so in Ferguson, Missouri, we have a Black mayor-elect, a Black police chief, and a Black city manager, who's my former college roommate.
Okay.
Shout out.
So cool.
Yes. Come on, Ella. And all the other Black officials in Ferguson. I see y'all.
Okay.
Yes, activism matters. Everything that's going on today, it matters.
Yes, it does.
Yes. Put a pin in that, because we're going to talk more about that in a moment.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the melanated senses. And as you guys know, those are the things that we see, taste, hear, smell, and touch throughout the week that are full of melanation. So again, Kwame, as our guest, I'd love to extend you the opportunity to, if there is something that affects one of those five senses, again, that you feel you want to touch on or you want to highlight or give a shout out to, and just tell us which particular sense it kind of activates within you.
Well, for today, I would say it was sight. When I went to my law office this morning on Peachtree Avenue, I noticed that a lot of the buildings downtown are boarded up because, we've had mass demonstrations in downtown Atlanta. When I left from work, actually the demonstration passed by the building, and it was just a beautiful sight. It was so beautiful from going to the office and seeing the buildings that were kind of boarded up, and I knew that we were making progress. And then to see all of those young people marching down Peachtree Avenue this afternoon, that was a beautiful sight.
That's beautiful.
All right.
I have a quick question about that. So the buildings that were boarded up, were those boarded up in anticipation of possible looting, or were they boarded up because something had previously happened, or what was the reason why the buildings are boarded up?
Well, for my building in particular, I can say that it was boarded up in anticipation of violence or looting. I'm at 235 Peachtree and Peachtree Center. So there's a Bank of America there that was boarded up, and there's a CVS on our first floor that was boarded up, and some other businesses that were around that were boarded up. I can't speak for the other ones, down the block and everything, but our buildings were not touched, but they were boarded up.
Okay.
Did you all put out any signs that said this is a Black business?
I did not. I saw some, and you would think I lived in Ferguson, but I know I have friends in Ferguson from who did that, and I have a brother in St. Louis who his office building is in downtown, and he did that. Mm-hmm. Peachtree Center, my office is in the high rise, so I didn't think that it was necessary, and a lot of the Black-owned businesses in our complex I know are located within the complex of Peachtree Center. But on Auburn Avenue and around Centennial Park, there have been Black-owned businesses that have put up the sign.
Gotcha.
All right. I wanted to also add a melanated sense to that. I want to add a melanated sense of sight. I had just recently attended one of the protests here in Brooklyn, and it was, hold on, let me rephrase that. I had went to one of the peaceful protests, which what a protest is, here in Brooklyn on Parkside Avenue and Ocean.
Oh, that's my old neighborhood.
Yeah. And it was beautiful. It was a lot of people, even though we're still going through a pandemic. So, hello, my anxiety was like all the way up top. But it was beautiful to see us actually be peaceful, actually being able to walk from that part all the way up Flatbush, make a left on Albemarle, come all the way back up Rogers Avenue, keep going as far as it went, without there being any serious damage to any type of equipment or anything like there. As the night got later, it started to have some problems. People started breaking cop cars and things of that nature, and I think we'll get into that. But the idea was it was a beautiful, peaceful protest, even us showing our anger, showing our frustration, showing how we really felt, as well as being there for each other, passing out water, passing out masks for people, passing out hand sanitizer. I saw a lot of people doing that, and it was just a beautiful moment. So to be experiencing that in the midst of all of this, I appreciated that moment. So that's my sense.
Beautiful. You know what? While you were saying just now, I would like to see what you guys think about, for the duration of this conversation, instead of referring to them as protests, referring to them as demonstrations, because I feel just like in the example that you just gave, PJ, where you started talking about it and then you had to go back and let me reiterate peaceful protest. I think that what's happening now is the word protest is getting all kinds of negative connotation attached to it. Like protest means rooting, protest or, looting, protest means riots, and that's not what it is. So until that word can be reestablished as the way it was supposed to be, like maybe we just say demonstrations for now, because it still activates the same things that you were saying, which was, people vocalizing their thoughts, showing their frustration in a demonstrative way. So what do you guys think? I know I'm going to call them demonstrations going forward and try to put the positivity back into what it is that we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll say this. I say demonstrations, and I also say protest, because we are protesting police brutality, and we're protesting the killing of innocent people. I believe that if we try to change or mix our words up, it may be a little bit of politics, of trying to be politically correct. And I just don't think that that's the time for me right now. This is what it is, and they have to take it. Looting is looting, rioting is rioting, and protesting is protesting. Mm-hmm. The protests that I've seen, they have been peaceful, but I don't even think that we have to qualify them as being peaceful. Some of them, we know that there's been a turn of events where they've had violence, but I'm not even going to address it, because until we address the why, there's no need and sense in addressing anything else.
All right now.
Okay, I feel that.
All right. I actually do agree, because I think it takes away a little bit of the actual, they're all demonstrations regardless. But the protest is supposed to mean we are protesting with the demonstration. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Maybe the words itself doesn't I feel a lot more comfortable saying protest because I'm protesting.
Yeah, I think that we kind of touch in respectability politics a little, and trying to be more respectable by changing our connotations and denotations of words. And no, F it.
Oh, you can cuss. Fuck it. Shit. Okay. This is one of the reasons why I wanted to actually have this conversation with you, and we're excited to have you with us here, Kwame. You are also the host of the Thank God It's Monday podcast. Yes, which is a weekly discussion dedicated to jurisprudence. Can you explain?
Yeah, well, I've been practicing law for 20 years, and I've taught on the college level for 10 years. And so when I engage people, clients, friends, students, I just realized that there is something missing in the fundamentals of the law, learning the law, knowing our rights, and knowing our duties in America. And so I decided to do this podcast to try to educate. And of course, it's taken off. It's been a really good movement, from my friends and family on social media platforms. And so it's really to educate so that people will know their rights. They'll know the law and know how to mix and equate the facts to the law. I talk to people every day, even with some of my colleagues who don't really understand what's going on. And I just try to break it down as easily as I can for them on the TGI Monday podcast. And the reason I chose TGI Monday is because we have to be thankful that we're here. And we start our weeks on Monday. We start our work weeks Monday morning. And so I want all of my people to know, especially my Black people, to know that thank God it's Monday. It's Monday. We're here. We're winning. And we will continue to win.
Okay.
Love that.
I have been slaving in the kitchen. Last week we had some gumbo. I think it's important that we have some more gumbo, because gumbo is a mixture of all cultures and everything thrown all up in the pot. And when you're Black everywhere. No matter where you're from, if you're from India, you got Black skin and you speak Indian, you're Black. You're from South America, you got Black skins, you're Black. Just throw it all up in the gumbo pot. So we're going to serve some more gumbo. We're going to serve some international gumbo. And being that you, sir, are a lawyer in Atlanta, I really want to speak about the breaking news that happened today. Today, we found out that this ex-officer Derek Chauvinot was previously charged with third-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter. The new charge is second-degree murder, second-degree murder charge, which says that he killed Floyd without intent in the course of committing assault in a third degree. You as a lawyer, can you please explain to us what second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter means? And if he's convicted of those charges, how long will he serve? How long will he be in jail? Can you please give us more information on these charges so that we can understand, for those of us who do not completely understand the law?
Okay, well, thank you. And that's what jurisprudence is. It's the study of the law. And so a killing is just that. If someone dies, they are killed. Now, a murder is someone who is killed unlawfully. And there are different degrees of murder. You have first degree, where you have to have malice or forethought and premeditation. And then second degree, which is something that's less than that, in third degree. In different states, they will label them differently. And then manslaughter is a wrongful killing, but not a murder. So the fact that the charges were changed from a third degree to second degree is powerful. It's a powerful move. And it's also going to be very difficult, as we know, for the prosecutors to get convictions. We have to overcome qualified immunity, which is something that officers have. And that's a fight that we're having in the legal community, to do away with that qualified immunity. But long story short, because I can be verbose, PJ. It carries 40 years. And second degree murder in the state of Minnesota carries 40 years. And the 3 officers that were charged with aiding and abetting,
correct,
they are essentially also being charged with that second degree murder charge. So it also carries 40 years for each one of those officers.
So as a criminal justice, attorney, lawyer, what are your thoughts on the fact that it was upgraded from third degree manslaughter to second degree murder? And as you mentioned, this is going to make it that much harder for the prosecution to actually get a conviction on this charge. And had it stayed the third degree manslaughter charge. So just you as a lawyer who has experience with criminal justice, what are your personal thoughts on the fact that the charges were changed?
I think that it was a good move. I think that maybe the first degree would not have flown. It wasn't a good thing to do first degree, and maybe second degree was something that they could sink their teeth into. Now, the black prosecutor in Minnesota, the state attorney general, he stated, now he needs everybody to step back and let them do their job. And I think that he was saying that respectfully, in the fact that he knows that they're going to have a hard hurdle to overcome. But I will say this also, that when a prosecutor wants a prosecution and when they want an indictment, it will happen. There's an old saying that a prosecutor can indict a potato. A prosecutor can indict anybody because the grand jury is a very secretive hearing, and the grand jury only hears evidence from the prosecutor. So the prosecutor can tell them anything, and there will be an indictment. And that was our problem in St. Louis, where our former prosecutor was Bob McCullough when Mike Brown was murdered, and there was not an indictment. And later we found out that there was false evidence that was presented at that grand jury. So I have faith in the prosecutor, because that's where this power lies, the prosecutorial power and prosecutorial discretion, which has been abused across America.
Actually, as you say that, I want to go back to that part. With the cases that were going on with Mike Brown, what specifically do you feel were the key parts that actually made the case what it was, and what could have made the case better for Mike Brown and his family?
The prosecution. You have a prosecutor who his father was a former police officer who was murdered by a black man. And that bias and that prejudice carried through his entire career. I have a brother and a nephew who were murdered in St. Louis County. Well, my brother was murdered in St. Louis County, the nephew in St. Louis City. So I've dealt with that office. And we have a black prosecutor in St. Louis County right now, because of, again, going back to Ferguson. But the Mike Brown situation went south because we had a prosecutor, Bob McCullough, who didn't want to prosecute. But you had a lot of eyewitnesses. They came out from day one and explained what they saw. So in the cases of Ahmaud Arbery here in Georgia, and in Mike Brown in St. Louis, and even with George Floyd in Minnesota, we saw on tape what happened in the latter two cases. The district attorney and the coroner still came back and said it was a murder. So when something isn't caught on tape, what do you think they're going to do? I have high-profile friends that handle these cases, and one of them told me that he won't take the case now unless it's a murder on film. And not that he doesn't have passion and compassion for those families whose murders were not captured on film. It's just almost impossible to get a conviction because we're not getting convictions when it is caught on film. So and multiple eyewitnesses. But the long story short, it lies with the prosecution.
So then I have a question then. What is the reason? Why is there so much pushback with certain policies and accountability, like when it comes to qualified immunity, in particular 50A? I know there's been a lot of talk about that in New York. Why is there, which offers blanket immunity to officers of the law? Why is there so much pushback? Why is it so hard to change this? Because like you said before, your colleague didn't want to take the case unless the murder was caught on film. So now we have a murder that's caught on film. Mm-hmm. And we've seen so much. It's only been a week and a half, which is crazy to even think about it. We've seen so much flip-flop back and forth. First, it was he didn't die of asphyxiation. Excuse me. Then, like a couple of days later, they had gotten an independent study, and then it was that he died of suffocation, essentially. So, I mean, and that doesn't take anybody to be a doctor or a rocket scientist to see that. We know how breathing works. So, why is there so much pushback? What are the hurdles that are there, and how can we dismantle that so justice can be served swiftly and with conviction?
Okay, the Civil Rights Act of 1871, and all of you all, I know you're all a bright group of young people. The Civil Rights Act of 1861, Congress allowed individuals to sue state and local officials, including police officers who violated their rights. So if you have a recollection of the Reconstruction period, this is when Black people around the country started to gain their civil rights. So that's key, because what happened after that is that you had the Black codes from the Southern Republicans who were in opposition to that Civil Rights Act. And then the Supreme Court in 1967, when you had a lot of cases against the police because of police brutality, they gutted the Civil Rights Act of 1871 and took away those rights to sue under the auspices of qualified immunity. So now we're trying to chip away at that. So we have to do away with it, but it has to do with history, and it has to do with the elected officials, the legislatures who wrote those laws, and then the Article 3 judges in that branch of government, the judicial branch, who are determining what those laws mean. So it's you have to look at it from every angle. There's not just going to be one answer. We have to attack the problems from each branch of government, the executive, the legislative, and the judicial. And we're going to have to attack it on the state and local level and the federal level, because we have to undo these policies. Now, the real reason is that modern day policing is rooted in slave patrols. In the colonial South, slave patrols were created to maintain white privilege and to subjugate Blacks. So if you see the stars that the sheriffs wear and the police officers wear, those badges came from those slave patrols. And because that's the culture of their companies, of their agencies, that culture has gone on and transcended to today. That's the culture in these agencies. So we have to gut all of these agencies. And we have to look for prison reform. We have to nip the industrial prison complex, and we have to abolish these local police departments as we know them.
Did anybody get a chance to watch the town hall that Obama gave today?
Yeah, I watched part of it, actually.
So much of what Kwame is speaking about was addressed in what our forever president said during that town hall today. So for our listeners, if you have not had a chance to watch that town hall yet, I implore you to watch it, because
I want to speak directly to the young men and women of color in this country who, as Playon just so eloquently described, have witnessed too much violence and too much death. And too often, some of that violence has come from folks who were supposed to be serving and protecting you. I want you to know that you matter. I want you to know that your lives matter, that your dreams matter. And when I go home and I look at the faces of my daughters, Sasha and Malia, and I look at my nephews and nieces, I see limitless potential that deserves to flourish and thrive. And you should be able to learn and make mistakes and live a life of joy without having to worry about what's going to happen when you walk to the store or go for a jog or driving down the street or looking at some birds in a park. And so I hope that you also feel hopeful, even as you may feel angry, because you have the power to make things better, and you have helped to make the entire country feel as if this is something that's got to change. You've communicated a sense of urgency that is as powerful and as transformative as anything that I've seen in recent
I know
years.
Specifically a lot of people that I've been talking to, people who have not been able to or who have not been out in the streets like protesting or feeling like I don't really know what to do. How can I participate? How can I help? Watch the town hall and listen to what President Obama is saying about the, I took notes on it. It was called the Task Force on 21st Century of Policing. And it talked about the different levels of reform that need to happen within this system, and specifically names like what needs to be done. And I think that's the thing that we also need to focus on, is getting our voice heard. Absolutely. Protesting and definitively stating what it is that we are speaking out against. But just as much as we are protesting, we have to take action as well. There have to be specific action items that we are actually doing to follow up to make reform, because protest is all about reforming policy. You can't do one without the other. So
I'm going to take a stab at something just because I think it's illustrative. It doesn't answer the entire question. When I was in the state legislature back in Illinois, we passed one of the first, if not the first, laws dealing with racial profiling in traffic stops. And there was no way to get that passed without support of the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, the primary organization of the police unions. And the argument I was able to make to them was that police officers are going to be safer if there is greater trust and less tension. That they will be able to do their jobs better if they have data that has been collected, that is clear, and police chiefs are going to be able to manage their forces more effectively. They will be less distracted by things that don't require an armed response, and they can refocus attention in ways that are good for them as well as the community. And it took a long time to make that argument, and I'm sure that there are rank and file members who didn't believe it. But in fact, after we passed it, we started being able to collect data on that issue, and we were able to get them to go along. Now, how responsive the police union is going to be in any circumstance it's going to go city by city, and it's not easy. But I guess the point I am making, and Eric Holder, if he's still on, may want to chime in on this. I do think there is police leadership that recognizes the need for change. But changing culture is hard. And sometimes the dynamics within the unions themselves are different. And sometimes there's that sense of we need to close ranks even though we know some things are messed up. And so finding ways to listen and recognize that they have a tough job, but also then insist that this is what we need to do. We're going to do it. We'll work with you to figure out how to do it. So when Brittany talked about the A can't wait, you should have a dialogue to find out what specific things are a problem with not having to choke somebody, particularly when they're already in handcuffs. What is it that you think is a problem? When you force people to articulate what it is that they object to with reasonable demands of the sort that have been outlined, a lot of times they come up empty. But you have to engage in that conversation. And I think that it's possible to get that done. That's just
my soapbox for the day. Continue on.
Mm-hmm.
Completely.
Yeah. So from the task force that you mentioned, from our forever president, came the Campaign Zero. And so these are the 10 elements that Campaign Zero are pushing to change the policing in America. So on the judicial side, we have to end the qualified immunity, but that's still an after effect, but in order to, so these families don't even have to file suits for the loss of loved ones, innocent Black people, we have to begin with these. And these are the 10, and I'll say them quickly. 1, end broken windows policing. We have to end broken windows policing. Statistics have shown that when you don't over-criminalize people for petty crimes, the crime will go down in the area. It goes up when you continue to over-criminalize people for petty crimes. 2, community oversight. Can't say that enough. In the case of Darren Wilson and Mike Brown situation, that officer did not live in Ferguson, Missouri. That's enough said about that. You have to have community oversight. Limit the use of force. Limit the use of force. We can look online and see white people combating police officers, spitting on police officers, fighting
in full regalia,
shooting at them, grabbing their guns, and the officers don't use of force on them. We have to stop using use of force as the first line of defense and use it as the last resort. 4, independently investigate and prosecute. We have to have independent investigators and prosecutors. In the case of Ahmaud Arbery, we had 3 white prosecutors who did not move to arrest the murderers of Ahmaud Arbery, and one we know was a police officer, a former police officer, and a former investigator of the prosecutor's office. So you have to have an independent review. 5, community representation, community review boards, and they have to be active, not just in name. 6, body cams film the police. We have to have body cameras. We've seen even throughout the protests, there's been violence against protesters, and body cams haven't been on. There has to be training in for-profit policing, demilitarization, and 10 fair police union contracts. So that all came from that initiative that you spoke about that President Obama started. And Brittany Packneck and D-Ray, they are a part of that task force.
I mean, I'd like to go back to a couple of things that you mentioned when you talked about the history.
Yes.
And the reason why I want to bring that up is because the history isn't very important as to what's happening today. And a lot of people don't understand that. There's a popular saying amongst our elders that you have to know where you come from in order to know where you're going. And today it's showing it because 60 years ago in the 60s, we had protests that were televised. And once it was televised, as we all know, is when changes began to happen. Once it was, once they saw us on TV being beaten, being hosed, being, attacking us with dogs and stuff like that. So the history that you spoke of with it going from them having the quote unquote catchers and during slavery time coming back to recapture people, even people who were already free, they were capturing them and throwing them into slavery. So with the history and everything that we know about it, and then you knowing about law and then speaking about these judicial, these judges and these pro se cutors and things of that nature. And I said that like that for a reason.
Yes. That's right. It's pro se, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I knew you would know. That's why I said pro se tutors. And those who know, they know. Mm-hmm. But anyway, just going forward, I really wanted to talk about this Insurrection Act of 1807. Please educate us on what exactly this act is, where it comes from, when it's been used in the past, because it's interesting that 45 mentioned this Insurrection Act of 1807.
Okay. All right. Well, that act is going to give the president power to pretty much take over local police departments. Because, again, the powers to regulate the police is a state power. It's called the police power. And the U.S. Supreme Court has stated that the states have the power to regulate the health, safety, and welfare of their citizens. That's why when we go get our hair done, that we have to go to beauticians who have state licenses. As a lawyer, I have to have a state license. The doctors have state licenses. The police are state employees. And so the president, he should have learned that lesson during the first round of the pandemic, January 31st. His Health and Human Services Secretary created the first state of emergency. He followed suit on March 13th, and he stated that he was going to do this, he was going to shut down these things, he was going to do that. As always, he was embarrassed. And his advisors told him, you don't have the power to do those things. Just as he didn't have the power to build the wall without Congress' approval. So what did he do? Because Congress gives the president, the executive branch, their powers. So he usurped them by creating an executive order. So anytime that a president wants to go around getting approval from the Congress, the House, and the Senate, he can create an executive order. Now, they will be fighting back and forth because usually the Democrats will say whether you had the power to do your executive order or not within their scope, and vice versa. It happens under each administration. But that's what that act will do. It will give him the power to control those local law enforcement, which he doesn't have to do, which he shouldn't do, and which he probably, hopefully if he does try that, the court systems will step in and see that he's overstepping his boundary. Because even now there are a lot of the legal scholars just saying that, that's ridiculous.
Oh, absolutely. And then speaking of that, voting is important. And a lot of people think that voting doesn't affect them individually. Oh, I don't vote, it doesn't affect me. However, we're seeing today that it does, especially when it comes to the local voting within your municipality. Can you please speak on that, sir?
Please.
I am no conspiracy theorist. I am a realist. I can tell you that I've seen so much in these 20 years. Even during the Blackout Tuesday, and I participated under caution. I told all my friends, I said, this is an election day. And, the reason for Blackout Tuesday was started by a couple of music executives, and it took on a bigger image, a bigger cause, which is good. But even through all of the posts, all of the election information that went out, I kept posting and reposting, and I did talk about it on my show. I said, you have states like Missouri, they don't have a primary tomorrow. They don't have a primary today. And, I didn't see it, not one place. I kept adding it to people who were posting about, elections in all of these states. I said, but you have local and state elections in these other states too, which are just going to be as important, if not more important. Going back to what Blair said during the president's speech, when I did hear him say that these mayors, they need to make sure that they put these policies forth on their police departments.
Yes.
That's not in a primary election. That's in the state and local elections. And again, Ferguson just proved to be a winner on that end. But there's so many people who missed out because there's a lot of people who didn't know that there were elections yesterday outside of that primary, the presidential primary. So, we have to take control on the local level, and that's where our power is. You have a lot of these municipalities where we have black people, but we don't have black people in charge.
All right, now.
Missouri was 60% black, had a white mayor, white police chief, and that's where all of those atrocities were happening. And because of the activism, now that has been changed around and it's reversed. And we have to do it in each municipality and each county in America.
That's the thing. I think for so long, the narrative around voting has been Black people need to vote because our ancestors fought to give us this right to vote. You know, and that's kind of like what the mentality was surrounded upon, was we have to vote because it's our civic duty. It's our right as United States citizens. But there really, I don't feel until recently, there's been more of an understanding of why voting is important. You know, we need to vote because like we were denied that right for so long. Yes, there's no denying that, but we have to be clear and understanding of where the change is actually going to happen. And that's at the local level. And we have the power to administer who's in charge of our municipalities, who is representing us on those local levels, where those changes are going to happen at the most basic level. And that's, I think, what we need to push is more the narrative as to why it's important to vote. I do feel like at the end of the day, as long as people vote, I'm good. But I think that if we further educate people on the actual facts as to why voting is important, people will start to kind of take that in and integrate that a little more. And I think that everything that's going on right now is even more evidence to that fact. And if we can really educate people on the fact that the local level is where we can invoke the most change. Like we can't look to the White House to like make all these changes for us. Like it has to be a bottom up system. Like it's not going to come from top down. We have to build it up.
Yes, I agree.
And I feel, and, you know, and I also feel like this was also part of like the conversation that the country has been having, Black America has been having, as far as like when Obama was elected president, how, well, Obama didn't do nothing for Black people. Do you realize who was in your local office at that time? There's but so much that an actual president is responsible for. Your local government is the one who actually affects the change in your community. Did you vote for your city councilman? Did you vote for your senator? Did you vote for your council? Any of whatever is on that ballot, whatever is being voted upon, did you have anything to say in that? And if you didn't have anything to say, don't put pressure on the man who's at the top of everything, because at the same time, it's the same argument about blaming Trump for all of this. Now we can blame him because he incites hate. That's just who this man is. But when it comes to on a local level, we can't blame him all the way and just put the blame on him, because it doesn't rest all upon his shoulders.
Right.
And as it pains me to say,
look, I told you it was me last week. It was me last week, and now it's you this week.
And it pains me to say this, and I say this all the time when it comes to people talking about like fuck Trump. Yeah, fuck him, whatever. And I'll say it again, F you, Trump. But the problem is, I might bleep, who knows? But
look, your FBI agent that's looking at you through your
that's serious, Blair. I have two families that contacted me this week who young adult children have been picked up by the FBI. One went from Minnesota to St. Louis. He traveled to Minnesota to protest. When he arrived back home, he was picked up by the FBI. A frantic woman called me yesterday. I went to the University of Missouri with her. They picked her daughter up because she made a post, and she did, a call for violence on businesses. She said, we need to come and tear this shit up, tear this F up.
Lord.
But they picked them up, and we just found out today that they aren't going to press federal charges. So that's the main thing. But we do have to be careful what we say, what we post, and what we do, because they are listening.
Of course.
They're coming from my ass then. I mean, child, the stuff I've been posting, I say, y'all going to lose. I need to loot the gun stores.
But it's also just so frustrating that that's really where you're deciding to spend your energy.
Right.
Like, really?
That's where our actual tax dollars are actually going towards, instead of actually creating the resolution that we need, instead of creating the revolution that we need, instead of doing anything that's going to actually help the situation. Let's just, and I'll get to you in 1 second, Chris. Like, this is the whole example of like when we were, actually go ahead, Chris, because I want to make another subject about this point.
Well, I mean, mine is I'm trying to like wrap a lot of thoughts in a nice little bow for you, Kwame. But as I told Phil earlier, I'm very much so. One of the reasons why I've been so distressed lately is that I've always been kind of the, how do we get to the root of the problem first, and then let's not just pick at the leaves, because that plant will just grow back, whether it be racism, whether it be social injustice, what have you. But what are some of the common core mistakes that happen when it comes to movements like this, whether they be racial movements or social injustices? Because the talk that's out there right now is that the United States has been founded on has been founded on war, right? It's been founded on the Revolutionary War. It's been founded on riots. It's been founded on
no taxation without representation.
Right. So, and it's very difficult for us as a people to really kind of quell our anger and like not be enraged and not go out there and be violent and do the right thing. And by no means, and I'll say this again, violence and looting is not my ministry, right? But there's so many people that are out there and they believe that. They're like, nothing has ever happened before, and without violence, without looting, without rioting. What do you say to those people? Like, how do you prevent us from making mistakes so that whatever we do isn't in vain?
Mm-hmm.
Can I add something to that question? Because there's two sides to that. Because you have people taking advantage of the protests, the anarchists, the white supremacists taking advantage of the protests that are doing stuff. You got cops picking out bricks. So I just want to add that
right,
because that's a loaded question.
Absolutely, and I'm glad that you brought that up as well. That's not to not keep that out. So,
well, we know that Dr. King was nonviolent, but he wasn't a pacifist. Dr. King carried a gun. Bayard Rustin was a pacifist, but I think that those are arguments and those are conversations that are taking us away from our main issue. We have to address the police brutality, and we can't stop demonstrating, and we can't stop protesting, period, until these things are resolved. Now, there are anarchists out there that are doing things, and there are looters that are doing things. There are rioters that are doing certain things. That's not my job, to police them. And then all I can say is that the people who are protesting and demonstrating, we have to keep doing those things to effectuate change.
All right. So this is actually bringing back to the conversation I wanted to have. So I was talking to my mother, right? And my mother randomly called me at like 10:30 at night. My lights were off. I was in my bed. She was like, "Where are you?" And I'm like, "I'm home. I can't see you because I'm in my bed."
It's a curfew.
Yeah. But my mother now lives remember, my mother now lives in Savannah. So,
I'm saying she called and asked where you were. You were like, "I'm under curfew. I'm at home." Continue. Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. So she asked me if I was out there, and I said, "Well, I went to a protest yesterday," and she went off on me, and she was like, "You shouldn't be out there. It's not right. It's wrong. You don't need to be part of that. It's a pandemic going on," which, number one, is the only argument that she actually had that was valid, because there is a pandemic going on. So we do need to be mindful. And that's the thing that I was worryful when I went out the first time. The only time when I went out for the protest. But I was trying to express to her how the media does play a really significant it plays a significant role, because now she's no longer residing in New York City, New Jersey, the tri-state area. So now she's resorting to local news, and local news isn't the same as national news. Local news will show you what they want to show you and not show you the full truth. And right now, if you look on certain networks or certain channels, you'll see rioting you'll see protesting. as if the protesting, which is what we were saying earlier, as if protesting equals rioting, which it does not. What would you say to those who are misguided in that understanding of what an actual protest demonstration is, as if they should know because they were here in the 60s and 70s and 50s? So,
well, it's just that what you said and Chris said and Blair alluded to. This nation was founded on the principles of the equality and freedom. We have their forefathers who came here from Europe because they were fleeing prosecution from the crown. Mm-hmm. Now, Thomas Jefferson, he was deep into Thoreau. That we had certain unalienable rights. That every human had unalienable rights and freedoms that should not be, should not be taken away. And so that's what our people are looking for today. We are fighting for health care. That should be universal. That should be a right. Education should be a right. We should be able to jog without being murdered. We should be able to sit in front of a store without being murdered. We should be able to sit in our house on our couch without police coming in and murdering us. So I think that we have to tell people that we have to continue to fight for our freedoms. We have to continue to fight so that we will be safe, so that our other brothers and sisters will be safe, and that the next generation will be safe. Because what I'm seeing is that things are heightening. The murders are not stopping. When I went back home to Ferguson to protest for Mike Brown, it wasn't 2 days before a police officer shot a man that had a knife. Mm-hmm. And it was at a gas station. And I was like, I cannot believe this. And then, of course, everybody's like, well, he did have a knife, and this, that, and the other. And I'm like, wow. I was like, there's still no excuse. So we're seeing the same things now. When Ahmaud Arbery was murdered in February, you all can look at my Instagram page. Go scroll down. I went to a protest at the state capitol. There probably wasn't even 20 of us there. Probably wasn't even 20 people. Probably good 15. Mm-hmm. So you have to keep protesting. We have to keep doing these things because that's the only way that we're going to get some attention.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference? You said something very important. You said when you went to that protest, it was only 20 people. And now that this is happening with George Floyd, we see thousands taken to the street. I mean, I want to say millions because it went international. And I was wondering, what's the difference? What made this the spark that made the bomb go off?
Okay, well, it's a few things. One, remember that the tape was recorded for George Floyd and for Ahmaud Arbery. The recordings were released. Another major factor is that we're under a pandemic. We're under a shelter-in-place order. We're all home. I'm home. You all are home. We're home every single day. I even tried to make my way to my law office today. What did I see? Boarded up buildings, students protesting. So the climate in the world has changed right now. It's
40 million unemployed.
It's Trump. Because America now has more deaths than any other nation, any other developing nations, third world countries, because of the poor leadership. Recall what I said earlier, January 31st, the Health and Human Services the director said that there was a state of emergency. Mm-hmm. His boss ignored that. So the poor leadership is leading to all of this. And those two young adults that were picked up by the FBI, that probably wouldn't have happened under another administration. That's why all of this is coming into play. And people are just fed up and people are tired right now because people are home. People have been going without income. The unemployment rates are very, very high.
40 million.
We don't have anything to lose.
Agreed.
And we warned you. We've been telling you to leave us alone. We've been telling you to stop killing us. We've been telling you that we want fair wages. We've been telling you that we want education and health care, that we want the freedoms that you all have. And you didn't listen.
Did you want to say something, Blair?
Well, I was just going to say everything he just said reminds me of your Instagram post the other day, PJ, where you said people better be glad that all Black people want is equality and not revenge.
Mm-hmm. I mean, because that's all we want. That's all we want.
It's coming. They're knocking down statues. It's coming. And
see, that's the thing, because what you shared you sent me a post in general as far as where the stars are. Like there's one time in history when Pluto was in something. If I'm going to look up that and I'll bring it back.
Boy.
Right. I'm gonna bring that back so people can understand where we are actually. Even like for those of us who don't follow astrology and the stars and things like that, everything is connected. Every single thing. I wanted to ask you in reference to your like, because you just said exactly what I posted today in reference to, and I'll probably just read what I posted. Okay, so I said, for further clarification, a white protester with a sign that says "Stop killing us." This message gets lost and confused, null and void, because it doesn't refer to you. If it's okay, why can't you just say stop killing Black people? Because that's actually who is being murdered. That is actually who's at danger. It's not us, because you are not one of us. And it's wonderful to have you as an ally. But from your perspective, what do you feel that the ally community, the non-Black community, even the POC community who aren't Black, those who are here for the fight, what do you feel from your perspective is the best way that they can assist us in this matter?
I have this conversation with a lot of colleagues, conservatives, liberals. I'll start by saying they still aren't Black, and they still don't understand the gravity of this situation. I think that in America, there may be 1,000 police killings a year. And so, they want to throw out statistics to try to downplay the different things. But what I would tell them is that they need to listen. They need to lead in the effects of policy changes at their jobs, at their agencies, getting the statutes for overturned, getting case law overturned, outdoing the qualified immunities, and instituting these police practices where they are in power, because we still are 13% of the population. So they still are the heads of all of these companies, police departments, and municipalities. So we need them to try to effectuate change in policy and law. That's what we need. We don't need a lot of fanfare. We don't need a lot of grandstanding. We need you to support us and get these policies changed. Mm-hmm. Because the bleeding heart liberals, a lot of times, their heart may be in the right place. They still don't understand. Since January 1st, 2015, 1,252 Black people have died by police shooting. 1,252. That didn't even include George Floyd, because he wasn't killed by a bullet. And there was a lot of other people, Sandra Bland, who was killed a different way, through strangulation. So the numbers are just astronomical. And in the past, those numbers we don't even have an accurate amount of data to put it in perspective on the national and historical level. There's some people, some historians have said during the transatlantic slave trade, it was millions to 5 million Africans were lost. Mm-hmm. And through the Jim Crow South, during the slave patrols, possibly in the millions. And so now, we're seeing this on camera. We have data to say it's been 1,252 unarmed Black people who were shot. So how many were armed? How many weren't shot? And this is just in the last couple of years. We need the white people to help us make changes in policies.
That's exactly my point. I saw this video, and it was here in New York, and it was under the Manhattan. It was in Dumbo, under the Manhattan Brooklyn Bridge. For those of you who don't live in New York, Dumbo stands for Down Under Manhattan
Bridge Overpass.
Bridge Overpass, yeah. And they were telling all the white allies who were there to get in front, because they were going to start marching or whatever the situation was, because they felt like that's more protective, so nobody would shoot at them.
Yeah.
Because if we were in front, then they'll still just shoot at us regardless. But they're using also these rubber bullets, and back. My understanding of what a rubber bullet was a little pellet, and it was really small. No, these rubber bullets, and this I'm talking about, these rubber bullets are like the size of,
they're regular bullets. Regular bullets, they just rubber.
No, they're much bigger than regular bullets.
They're the size of the murder hornets that are out here in the country.
Nerf gun pellet, like what the hell?
Yeah, so I while I appreciate those who are of the non-Black community, I And yes, we need them to stand up because we've been doing it. We're tired of saying it. Like, yes, you guys need to say something and do something because every single time we do something, we get killed. Every time when we say something, we get killed. Every time that we don't say anything, we get killed. Every time we don't do something, we get killed. So we're damned if we do, damned if we don't. You guys have the privilege of being able to say what it is that you want. I was just watching something where this guy was, they showed the difference. This man killed 2 people and they held him. This is a white man. They held him on the curb and they gave him water. And this is something that Snoop had posted. And Snoop had said, "You want steak and potatoes with your murder, sir?" Like we are not given that same regard. And I never really realized up until George Floyd how exhausting this is.
So I do have a question for people who are non-Black or white in particular. What are we doing or what are we saying to them so that they can understand? Because they can never really walk in our shoes, right? They're not Black, so they really won't ever really fully understand. But what are some of the things that we can understand? What are some of the things that we can do to get them to understand? Because I have, in particular, in the past couple of days, my emotions and my mental has been not on high at all. Mm-hmm. And anybody that knows me knows that on a scale of 1 to 10, my mental is typically at like an 8, 9, or 10. And for me to come out onto this and say that it's been a 4 for the past couple of days is very detrimental. I mean, I was talking to friends, to white friends of mine, and I just started the questions as, why do you hate us? What is it that we've done? What is it that we can do? Like what, I'm just asking, and I was just blurting out a whole bunch of different things and telling them that basically in the past 2 to 3 days, I've been on the verge of tears because I just don't know where to begin. And I had one particular friend, white friend of mine, who was trying to kind of convey his thoughts in terms of like, what are some of the issues in terms of like why some of the things are happening, how he feels coming from his perspective, from his community. He feels that it's a group mentality. He feels that if there's nobody that's on the inside, there's no one to like really say, hey, it's wrong for you to do this, because they're not going to listen to us. If you're racist towards us, they're not going to listen to me. They're not going to listen to you. You don't look like them. And he went into going to further. He said that it's not necessarily hate. He said some people are nasty and disgusting and it's hate. He said, but some of it is just not hate. Some of it is just simply they're afraid of not being in front. And it's not just white people, it's just anybody. They're afraid of being left behind and no longer having the power. So what do we say to them to kind of like get their eyes to be open? Because I don't know how much more of this I can do.
Right. I understand you wholeheartedly. As you can see, I've never been at a loss for words. And I'm always a very active and outgoing person. And like I say, even when I'm protesting and it's just 10 of us or 20 of us, I keep it going. I keep it moving. Just a little background. My mother is a former state representative in St. Louis County, brother, business person. So I've always been in this mix. So to see this big movement and people coming on board, more so than Mike Brown, more so than I'll go back even old school, Rodney King. That's when I was in college protesting. I'm happy and I'm glad to see that. The white folks are going to have to learn empathy, because I have to put myself in their shoes too. What if I was a wealthy Black lawyer up in New York, in my penthouse looking down on the people protesting? Power to the people. Who knows what I would do? I can't put myself in their shoes and they can't put themselves in my shoes, but we have to try to practice empathy. They know it's not right. That is just point blank. To be killing so many thousands of unarmed Black people is just not right.
How about
they have to be able to look at that and feel that. They can't put themselves in our shoes, but we have some that understand.
And it's okay to have some that understand, but we need all to understand. And I think that they all do. They just refuse to accept it.
Privilege. They don't want to lose their privilege.
And that's the problem. That's the problem. So all these Karens need to talk to some Kellys. So the Kellys are the ones who are writing the letters to whatever business. The Karens need to stop calling them on Black people. Talk to the Kellys, because the Kellys can show you, hey, how about this? How about you write a letter to your congressman, tell them? How about you want to do all these different things to incite like some cop coming to your house for some random Black person? How about you write about something you do something that's going to actually help us, and stop trying to kill us. I'm sorry. And I feel the exact same way you do, Chris, because like I have been on 3. I can't even say, I think like during the week, us starting to do these Zooms have been like the highlight of my week.
Okay, and I agree with you. I've never really, I can't say that I've never felt like this before, but like it's been very few and far in between, and everybody's noticing like the emotional change that I've had in me, and I've been doing nothing but trying to express that, because that's the only way that I've been trying to do. Like even my creative side has been like disrupted from that, because I can't think straight. I think whatever ideas that I might have, is it good enough? Does it really convey the thought that it needs to, that I need to get out there? But to just kind of go back to that, like, I don't know. I lost my train of thought.
No, I get it, because I also too, there's so many words and verbs and nouns and blah, 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 that I feel that it's hard to convey what I feel in my soul and my spirit and my body. And I've been crying every day. Mm-hmm. I've been because I've been keeping up on everything. I'm out. I'm at a loss for words, because I am a high-spirited person. I'm empathic. I pick up on vibrations and energy, and I cannot stop crying. And just to see people shot, like they actually showing these cops were holding down this man on the ground, and then the cops got his gun and just shot him right there.
Or the 90-year-old woman who came out on her lawn to protect her grandson. Like, I that took me over. That I was laying in the bed when I first saw it, and that I just saw my grandmother, and I know she would do something like that, because my grandmother was that woman of the community, and she spoke up for everybody else. And come to find out, my grandmother was the ally of the community for the gay community. So I know she would have done something like that, regardless of whether it was her grandchildren, her children, her neighbors, or whatever. But it's just like, why does it have to take that? And they still had their guns drawn on her and then knocked her over.
Mm-hmm. It's the respect, that when they see us, it's the respect that whites have for Blacks in America. And it goes back to the policies on how this nation was founded. And us as being chattel, us as not being human. And so they look at us and see us as being human, then that's not going to change. That's why I'm not focusing on the rioting and the looting. I'm focusing on the police brutality that's going on. There's been more instances of police brutality since George Floyd died. Right. We have to correct that. We have to make sure that they stop harming us by any means necessary. We have to make sure that they don't harm us. Now, the white allies, that's going to be good. But we have made strides. We continue to make strides. Remember, we're only 13% of the population. You don't have any other nation where you have 13% of the population with so much power like we have in America. And we have to continue to keep fighting. That's it.
Especially on the heels of what anniversary is this of Tulsa?
99 years.
99 years.
Yeah, and this is okay. So I was saying this earlier, and I said I was going to bring this up. And thank you, for sending me the picture itself. And this is food for thought. Now, understand this, guys. Like when I say like where everything is connected. Period. The last time Saturn was in Aquarius, like as far as like when a planet is in a certain sign, there are certain things that happen, certain things take over.
There are constellations in the sky that are based on all 12 signs. And when a planet moves into that said constellation is what it means to be Saturn is in Aquarius.
Yeah. So Saturn is in Aquarius. The last time Saturn was in Aquarius was during the Rodney King riots. The last time Pluto was in Capricorn was during the American Revolution. Okay, so you got those two. The last time Neptune was in Pisces is when Rome fell.
And And then I also want to say something. Saturn is in retrograde. When Saturn goes into retrograde, Saturn is known as the Lord of Karma, which means all of your karma is coming back to, what did Malcolm X say? The chickens have come home to roost. So retrograde means that a planet is moving backwards. It's not moving backward. What it does is it slows down to the position of Earth. So as the planets are circulating the galactic center, I won't go there right now, later, but it doesn't mean that the planet is going backward. It just means that it slows down. And that's what Saturn retrograde means. And because Saturn is so far out, it takes longer. So that's why these things are being drawn out. So everything that we're seeing is not only the planet and the people, but it's the universe of protest. And we Black people are of the universe because we are etheric beings. We are eternal and forever. We are gods in the flesh. And I'm just going to
My birthday is June 12th.
But wait. But at the same time, so I bring those three things up because guess what? All three of those planets, we are in presently, right? Like it's right now. All of that it's just compiling one on top of the other. Everything is the same time.
And Venus is in retrograde. It's a lot happening. You know, Taurus is in Uranus, and you guys should look this stuff up because it's very important to know. And it's not horoscopes. This is astrology, which is based on ancient information that's come out of Kemet, not the Greeks. Kemet, from our ancient people who also knew that Sirius B was a planet that we come from. Look it up. It's out there.
That's a whole nother conversation for another day, but and we're going to have that conversation. I'm dead serious. So
let's say that I want to ask you a question, Kwame. So if you had a chance to either talk to the ancestors, your ancestors 1,000 years ago, or your descendants 1,000 years in the future, which would you choose and what would you say?
I probably have to talk to the ancestors. I don't know. Don't look like I'm gonna have too many descendants, but I would.
Ain't that look?
It's sad, but it's true. What would you ask? What would you say? What would you ask or say if you had that opportunity?
1,000 years ago, talking to my ancestors. Man,
1,000 years ago, we had some African empires.
I know, that's what I'm saying. I tighten the ship, keep the ship tight. You know, there's some animals, some devils coming to displace us and be weary. Because see, Black people, we are forgiven people. We are forgiven now. We're forgiven in Africa now as they're beating our brothers and sisters in China over the coronavirus. You know, we're forgiving them in Africa before it even happens. I will let them know, just be vigilant. Be vigilant.
And what about the future? Let's just say that there are
descendants.
If I had some descendants in the future, okay, I would tell them, I know that we survived this, and I know that all of the foundation that was laid in the past has created a rebirth and a new kingdom.
Mm-hmm. And you know something? It's so funny. It's so funny you say that because I was sitting there thinking that when I saw that too, and I was thinking in my mind, if depending on where we are, what we do, I don't want to have to look in the future generation and say sorry.
Right.
We didn't do anything.
That's a powerful statement, right there.
We just laid there and just took it, and then when we didn't take it, we took it to the streets, which made it worse for you. So and when I say take it to the streets, I mean in the violent, rioting, looting way. Looting is a coward. It's not what we are. It's not what we're about. At least that's the Blackness that I walk around with every single day when I wake up in the morning.
That's why we need to go get our stuff back in those museums.
Right. We live in a nation when the Western Europeans and the Americans have been the most violent nations, the most violent people in the history of the world. And
where do they think we learned it from?
They've stolen more than any other empires in the history of the world. All of our museums are filled with loot.
All from the Crusades.
Message.
I'm telling you, just so you guys know, and I forget to mention this when we're talking about the planets, but we are entering the age of Aquarius, and the age of Aquarius is about information. And this is why it's important that we have technology, we have internet, we have cameras, because everything is being exposed. It's very important that we're living in an age where we can make the most change right now, because we are our ancestors reincarnated. And now that we have the power, we're living in the most powerful time that we've ever lived, because we have so much information at the tip of our fingers. We have a platform that we can be able to speak to millions of people. You know what I mean? Without having to leave your home. And it's very important that, you guys understand where we are today, that we have to make these changes. We have to speak up, because the 20s that are happening right now is going to affect the 40s and the 50s that we're going to be seeing soon. And I want to look back in the 20s and say, we did that.
Because we are part of that revolution right now, as our grandparents and our parents were part of the civil rights movements, and before then of the freeing of slaves. I also want to add to that point that the patriarchy is over. As a man with 2 descending balls and a penis, it is time that we sit down and. Did I say descending? I think that's what they are, right? Because they hang, right?
They can be ascending.
Yeah, Lord Jesus.
Yeah. Let's hope they're not ascending.
But it is time for men to sit down and shut.
Just kidding.
No. But it's serious. But
only speak when you have something positive to add to the conversation.
Now, see, and I was watching something before, and it was just talking about the differences, number one, between male and female, right? And this is slightly off topic, but it's still on topic. Men are very territorial and, just ownership and, control, and, women are nurturing, or it has been said to be so, nurturing and caring and forgiving. It is time that the men who are in office, the men who have power, the men who run these corporations, the men who own these businesses, that they sit and give some women an actual real chance. This is a whole nother conversation for a whole nother day, because I started
it off by saying the women, we have to pick up the baton and we have to carry this. We have to carry.
And it's a heavy weight.
Mm-hmm.
That means
my parents have been married for 60 years.
Come on.
And in the 70s, my father owned a business. I come from a line of entrepreneurs. And my mother also worked a 9-to-5. And that was unheard of in the 60s and 70s. And then she went into politics, and they both complemented each other. My father, active in the church, business owner, and my mother worked 9-to-5, then worked in government as a politician. And I love the way that I saw them interacting. And like I said, they really did indeed complement each other. I talk to both of them every single day. And they've been married for 60 years in St. Louis, Missouri.
And on top of that, your mother is the first Black what?
She's the first Black female councilwoman in University City, and she was the first Black female state representative from her area. But her biggest one, she was the first Black president of women in municipal government. That's the big.
All right.
She was the first Black president of women in municipal government, which you all know is a big, powerful white organization of all the elected officials, white women around the country.
Come on.
Kwame, thank you so much. We're not over yet. I'm so grateful that you're here having this conversation.
I'm glad that you all are having me today. I retired from teaching. I figured that putting in 10 years teaching was enough, and I just wanted to pull back and focus 100% on my law firm. And so that's when I started the podcast. Said, I can still teach, because as you all stated, the technology is here for me to still do that.
Right.
And reach so much more.
That's where we are.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have any other questions or anything unless you want to jump into dessert?
Until Black Lives Matter, all lives don't matter.
I saw this one video of this white woman. This was probably the best white person explaining it. And she had this big diagram. She had it said all lives. And then she had here's the white lives, the Black lives. This and
I posted that. Oh, that was good.
and she was like, see, the reason why we're saying all Black lives matter and it's not all lives matter, because you see these Black lives here, we keep killing them. So can we stop killing them? And then guess what? all lives will matter. But right now, at this point in time, we have made it very clear, and she took ownership for it. We have made very clear that Black lives don't matter to white people. Well, she didn't say those words, but that's the whole purpose behind.
And you know what? There have been so many points throughout this conversation that have touched on just what my moniker was when we started the conversation was this time feels different. And this time does feel different to me. I was talking to my best friend about this yesterday in the sense of this time it just feels different. I feel that there is more of a united front than we've ever had before, where it's not just the people who are being oppressed that are in the streets protesting. It's a more diverse group of people. And I think that we need to acknowledge that. I know we were talking before about, like what white people need to be doing and how they can be better allies. But I think that we do need to take the time to specifically note that I'll say for me personally, I have seen so much in social media about white people educating other white people on what privilege is and making it plain as day. And I've been seeing so much more of that. And that's one of the things that we've been asking for years. And we've been doing ourselves is educating white people on like what white privilege is. But to see other white people actually doing that's one of the many, many, many things that makes me feel like this time feels different. And again, like during the town hall earlier today with our forever president, like he touched on it too, saying that this time is different. Like these protests and these demonstrations that are happening today they look so much different than they did, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And that's because of the people who are making up this group of demonstrators, this group of protesters. And with that, before we get into dessert, those are some of the reasons why I feel like this time feels different to me and why I feel like we're going to be able to enact some type of reform on some level. I hope my prayer and my wish is that it's enacted on a grand scheme, but if we can make some type of reform, even at, the smallest level that we can make it on, I feel like this time is the time when that's actually going to happen, when there is going to be policy reform within the police department, when there is going to be accountability within the police department and specifically with police brutality. So Kwame, those are just some of my thoughts. And then I'll get into the dessert after this, but just you specifically, because you have been involved in this game for so long with criminal law and with demonstrating and protesting, what about this time feels different for you?
Yeah, it does feel different. The atmosphere is different. I've been practicing law for 20 years. And one of my first cases, there was a young gentleman by the name of Jarvis Murphy. He was pulled over by the police in Pagedale, Overland, Missouri. And his license plate wasn't affixed correctly. And he ended up going into a coma from that interaction and later died. It was one of my cases. And we marched, we marched and we consoled the family and we fought. And just like so many countless cases, no convictions for the officers, no reprimands. Like I said before that, the Rodney King, we marched. And throughout a lot of that time, up until I would say that a lot of the turning point was the Black Lives Matter movement out of Ferguson. It was just always a sense of resentment towards Black people. You're troublemakers. No one really just wants to hear it. With agitators in law school, I was known as an angry Black man, and I'm far from an angry person. I'm angry about injustice. So those are things that we've had to deal with just in my generation. So you can imagine before that, people just weren't here for it. Now I feel the love, most importantly, among Black people. I feel that we are united. Mm-hmm. And because of that, we have other races who are being supportive and united with us. I swear, today, it was a very, very mixed crowd marching down Peachtree. Mm-hmm. You don't see much of that in Atlanta. Mm-hmm. There was a march today in St. Charles, Missouri. Again, I'm from St. Louis County. So St. Charles was always the what they call them, the sundown towns, where black people needed to get out by a certain time of day. When I saw that, I almost cried. I was like, they were marching in St. Charles, Missouri. That's almost, that was like the KKK stronghold back then. Mm-hmm. So this time, it is definitely different. One thing we can credit our president for is bringing like-minded, sensible people together. Through all of his ignorance and hate, he's making us love and come together for justice.
I won't give him credit for that, but I mean, I can understand.
I think that's the only thing that he's done. He's been so overt.
No, the only thing that
white people are seeing that the nonsense.
No, I feel that the only thing that he's done is shown us who the white people that we know in our circle or around us, who they really are. That's the only positive I can say.
Trust me, I'll stop talking to a few.
You know what's funny about that is that when I'm like asking questions of people who are non-people of color, and I feel like they take too long to answer, like I'm looking at my phone and I start squinting, like blacks, like
When people ask me, especially white people, they want to know, how do I feel about the protest? No, how do you feel about it? Mm-hmm. That's what matters.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Time for dessert?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as you...
She like, okay.
Okay.
This has been a heavy conversation.
It's a lot.
Rightfully so.
This is why we always end it with something sweet.
Yeah.
But as you've noticed, Kwame, we're a bunch of foodies around here. We like to take it through the whole entire meal, and we can't skip dessert because that's blasphemous. So we want to just give you the opportunity to leave kind of like your final thoughts. Just if there's anything that you want the listening audience to take away from this conversation, or one thing that you want to make sure that they understand, what is that thing? And then just tell us what is your go-to dessert of choice?
Okay. My takeaway in closing is that I want everyone who's listening to know that we are in a critical place in America right now. Things can go far left or far right. We want to maintain and make sure that we have justice achieved for everybody. Again, policing in America is a result of America itself. This system was not built to respect Black people. It was not built so that we have equal rights. So for us to have made the strides that we have made through the generations is a positive. What we're doing right now is a great thing. We have to make sure that we abolish the policing in America that is known today, because again, that is deeply rooted in slave patrols. We have to make sure that we change the policies in government that are there to maintain white privilege and to subjugate Black people. And until we change those things, nothing else will change. And with that, my favorite dessert is chocolate cake.
Ew.
Okay.
Chocolate cake. Okay. Can't go wrong with that chocolate cake.
I mean, we talked about chocolate. Okay, fine. I'll have a slice.
Let the man have his dessert. He didn't say what is your favorite dessert. This is his go-to.
I want to add. Can I add a topping onto that? Is that okay?
I'll allow it.
Thank you. I also would like a final thought also to be that once this pandemic is over, and we're not talking about the pandemic of racism that's been going on for decades and hundreds of years.
Centuries.
Okay, centuries. Thank you for correcting me off. I was about to call you officer. Forgive me.
Attorney.
Officer of the court.
Officer of the court. Okay. The one thing once this pandemic is over, we need to start showing all of our love, all of our appreciation, every bit of support that we have for all of our Black-owned businesses, for our Black friends who are doing things, everything. We need to show up. Like, we really need to actually do what we were not doing before. which was spending our money where it needs to be spent within our community, regaining what Black Wall Street was back then. Because guess what? Right now, we need the money to circulate within our communities more than we ever needed to before.
I made a post earlier today about the impact that that Black people can have on the economy, and it lists out exactly like day by day what to do. I'll send it to us as a group, but basically it was saying like on the first day, don't shop at major department stores like Target, Walmart, whatever. On the second day, avoid shopping here. On the third day, avoid shopping here. It lists it all out, and then it says what to do for Juneteenth, and then what it says to do for July 4th this year. And then it also iterates like any of these days, shop Black-owned businesses, support Black-owned businesses. So again, like I think like I said before about voting, we need to really make sure people understand the impact that this can have and that this can accomplish if we all stick to it and if we all do it.
Hell, not even, I just want to make an addendum to that. We don't even have to wait. We can start now, because I know one of the things that I've been doing, being so frustrated, I've just been trying to find different ways of reaching out and supporting other people. So anybody that has a business, I came across an Instagram post recently of a gentleman. Forgive me just because it was so brief, but he sings, and I looked him up on Spotify and I followed him. Sometimes that's all it starts to take so you can get the ball rolling. Sometimes people are so talented and they don't have the support that they need, so they let their passion fizzle out. Absolutely not. Not on my watch. Not on my watch.
Come on, Iana.
I reclaim my time.
Right.
You got one?
I actually would like to have to jump in on the final thought too. There's a couple bullet points I wanted to just point out. Number one, we are still in the midst of a conscious awakening. This is also why this is happening worldwide. So please don't forget that. And it's very important that you get your rest and that you practice self-care practice. I do want to give a shout out to Amsterdam, Mexico, Paris, China, Tokyo, New Zealand, the Amish as well.
Amish, y'all, the Amish
coming through,
showing up,
coming out.
Thank you so much.
And then I also wanted to also give a shout out to the company that I work for, Viacom CBS, because on all their stations, they did a 8-minute blackout on Tuesday where they played The Breath. And they said, and on the screen it said, "I Can't Breathe," and it was on Nickelodeon. And to all the white parents who were upset about that being on Nickelodeon, please don't be, because this is your chance to teach your children differently, because it starts with the children. Once you teach them not to be racist and not to hate us, they can grow up to be different, and be in this world. So I do want to thank the white people that are on the front line, standing in front of Black people willing to be shot, because I've seen many videos of them being shot with rubber bullets, standing in barricades in front of Black people to protect us. And I want to say that I thank you, because we do have people that listen to our podcast that are white, who we have met in person. Really, and I used to work for a previous name company who I refuse to say. But I did want to, just point that out, that we see you, we thank you, and we hear you. Please continue. Do not let this just be a right now thing, because when things go back to quote unquote so-called normal, don't go back to your normal acts. You have to change, and it starts from within. And it starts from a conscious thought of doing so.
All right.
Thank you.
Kwame, blast before we leave. Where can everybody get your information for TGIM? Thank God It's Monday.
My Thank God It's Monday podcast is on Anchor and Spotify and a few other platforms. And it's under my name, Attorney Kwame Thompson. Thank God It's Monday.
All right. And on that note, guys, thank you for taking the time to listen to another episode of Highly Melanated. As always, you can follow us on any forms of social media. Highly Melanated Podcast on Instagram, Highly Melanated, H_Melanated Pod on Twitter, the website, highlymelanatedpodcast.com. And as I said before, pretty soon we'll have a toll-free number and where you guys can actually call to leave your information. There are still some things going on that we're still working on, and as well as the studio is still working on when it comes to them doing voting. But that's not right now here. And I'm voting for like podcast of the year and things like that. That's not important right now. But it is important. But we appreciate all of you guys who have taken the time to listen to this episode. Share this with your friends. Pass this on. What we do, and I'll speak, and I think I speak for all of us, is what we do, especially with this podcast, is to help our community in any way we can. And this is a platform that we are able to express our views and peacefully, as well as, express our frustrations, and just want to make sure that we're all heard. So on that note, love, peace, and
take it by the roots, not by the leaves.
Hey.
Peace. Okay, guys. Right. All right.
We have not fought and died on the front lines of. There has been no job we haven't done. There's no tax they haven't levied against us, and we've paid all of them. But freedom is somehow always conditional here. You're free, they keep telling us. But she would have been alive if she hadn't acted so free. Now, freedom is always coming in the hereafter. But you know what, though? The hereafter is a hustle. We want it now. And let's get a couple things straight. Just a little side note. The burden of the brutalized is not to comfort the bystander. That's not our job. All right, stop with all that. If you have a critique for the resistance, for our resistance, then you better have an established record of critique of our oppression. If you have no interest in equal rights for Black people, then do not make suggestions to those who do. Sit down. We've been floating this country on credit for centuries, and we're done watching and waiting while this invention called whiteness uses and abuses us, burying Black people out of sight and out of mind while extracting our culture, our dollars, our entertainment like oil, black gold, ghettoizing and demeaning our creations, then stealing them, gentrifying our genius, and then trying us on like costumes before discarding our bodies like rinds of strange fruit. The thing is that just because we're magic doesn't mean we're not real. Thank you.